What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Slaw Sports Show. I'm your host, as always, Cole Noble, aka Slaw, here for another episode of the Slaw Sports Show. And as you can see behind me, today we're talking NFL draft prospects, starting off with our expected first-round quarterbacks. And yes, I said our, because today I'll be joined by Matt Laguza, friend of the show. Came on multiple times and for multiple editions, and we're going to bring him back because he'll be joining us on the desk for the draft show, either with One-on-One Sports or potentially back here again. Still figuring out logistics for the draft show. But for now, we're going to be just diving into prospects leading up to the NFL draft by position per week. So this week we're starting off with the quarterbacks. Next week we will move on to wide receivers and all the way up until the draft, position by position. So we'll bring in Matt Laguza from London. Matt, how's it going, my man?
Going well. It's been a while. I'm excited to get back into it.
Yeah, I'm excited to get back into it too. It's finally quarterback time. I'm excited to talk about these prospects, quarterbacks especially. I mean, there's just so much diversity with these quarterbacks in terms of the prospects and in terms of, their projections. I mean, some guys, like in my mock draft that I did last week, Malik Willis, I had number 2 overall to the Detroit Lions. I've had some where, Malik Willis falls in the 20s. Kenny Pickett falls in the late 20s, or Kenny Pickett isn't, like what I had goes up into the top 10. So it's crazy where these quarterbacks are going to fall. And we have some guys on here that, some have put in the first round of their mock draft. Some don't even have them, have them as late day 2 projections. The projections are just completely off the board with these quarterbacks, and I haven't seen anything like it.
No, it's insane. And, everybody's talking about how this draft class isn't anything special. And, you're not going to, as of right now, you're not seeing any Joe Burrows, Justin Herberts, or anything like that. But as you said, it's just the predictions are everywhere. Some people have five quarterbacks going in the first round. Some people have 1 quarterback going in the first round. It's just all over the place. And with all the trades that have happened, it's just thrown it even crazier. So, it's going to be an exciting time. I'm excited to get into these guys, and it'll be interesting to see what everybody thinks.
All right, let's kick it off with, I think, is our consensus quarterback 1 of this year's class. And, if you're not with me, but it's going to be Malik Willis out of Liberty. And I think, you're nodding, so I think you're in agreement with, the quarterback 1 designation that I have. I think he's going to be the first one off the board in April. I think we're in April now, but I think we're about 4 weeks away officially, just under that in terms of getting to the draft. But Malik Willis is a guy I like a lot of upside with him, a lot of potential, raw in a lot of areas, but definitely a guy that I think teams, if they're looking at a quarterback, should be the guy that you take the risk on drafting in the first round.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that. And with the teams looking for quarterbacks, I think Malik Willis fits a lot of their schemes. He's probably the most electrifying quarterback in this class with his dual threat ability. He's got a great arm. He's got great speed. Obviously, like most other quarterbacks in this draft, he does have his flaws. We'll get into that in a little bit. But if you're looking at pure potential and someone that can just lightening up your offense, get it going, Malik Willis is that guy. And I think if you're looking, as I said, if you're looking at some of those teams that are still looking for quarterback, Lions, the Carolina Panthers, teams like that are early in the draft, I think they'd much rather go for a guy like Willis than they could go for a guy like Pickett or a Corral.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much that I personally like in Willis's game. Studying his tape, there's moments that really popped off on the tape, but there's also moments where you're kind of wondering the decision process. There's some issues with consistency, with anticipation that you would like to see cleared up if you're going to take a risk on this guy. But what we saw from his combine, made some great throws, did great in his pro day as well. I think that there's a lot of buzz around him. And I think if he's put in the right situation, maybe ideally sits for a year, I think he could eventually be groomed into something that could quite turn into a franchise guy in the National Football League.
Oh, yeah. There's no question about it. And I think a lot of these guys, all 5 of these guys, could potentially be franchise guys. They have to be put in the right situation. And I think that's going to be a theme that we're going to talk about a lot. And as you mentioned, there are some concerns about Malik Willis. In my opinion, one of them is he runs a lot. He tends to put his eyes down. He doesn't keep his eyes down. He gets ready to go, and he leaves the pocket a little early sometimes, which can be a concern, which is why sitting for a year might be a great idea, which is why the Lions are such an intriguing team to me for him. Whether he goes at 2, whether he goes at 32, 31, whatever it is, or if they trade up. But, you've got Jared Goff locked in, so I could see a team like that who has someone at the position right now going and taking a little look at him. Because he's got the potential. He's got the electrifying stuff. You just need to figure out, can his flaws be fixed? And that's the question for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, even a team like Pittsburgh, who just signed Mitchell Trubisky in free agency, allows them the opportunity to, start Mitch for a year, get Malik through the thick of things, in training camp throughout the season, let him progress, and then, give him the reins. But what is it specifically off the tape that you like best out of Malik Willis in terms of a prospect potential?
I mean, if you're looking at Malik Willis, his attitude towards the game of football is amazing. You see him out of the huddle. You see him with his teammates. He is a true leader out there, and that's what you're looking for, especially on some of these young teams that need a quarterback. Malik Willis, he just brings an energy to a team and to a locker room that some of these other guys won't be able to bring. There are a lot of mellow mindsets or mellow attitudes in this draft class when it comes to the QBs. And, that's a little concerning sometimes because the quarterback is supposed to be the leader. He's supposed to be the one that takes the accountability. He's supposed to be the one that fires the team up. And a lot of these guys don't have that. So seeing the kind of energy that Malik Willis brings is huge, especially for himself. That's going to boost his draft grade and draft value. I just love him. As a person, as a quarterback, as a football player, he is just all around great for any team.
Yeah, what really pops off for me about his game is really just the off-script, playmaking he can do.
Yeah.
When nothing's going his way, with the design play, he's able to get out of the pocket and extend the play either with his legs or even, get out of the pocket and, make an off-scripted throw. Using some scramble drills with his receivers. He has a great connection with them, and the playmaking, just especially in the red zone. He Liberty used a lot of design quarterback runs and quarterback read options with him, where he was really able to excel and get into the end zone. I mean, 27 rushing touchdowns at Liberty is quite impressive. I mean, compared to the 47 passing touchdowns he had during his time at Liberty. But overall, just elite upside, raw in some areas. I think a lot of concern might also be, the fact that he was at Liberty and wasn't necessarily just dominating all the opponents he faced. Like we saw Trey Lance last year going 3rd overall from North Dakota State, and it was rightful. I mean, he dominated every team he faced in the FCS, and in the division in the conference, that Liberty's in. That's the kind of outcome you expected for Malik Willis if you expect him to be the quarterback one of this class, and just that consistent level of elite play wasn't there from him. And I talked about earlier the anticipation, just another nitpick I have. Like, the guy can power a ball, but there's times where he didn't trust the read well enough, or powered it just a little bit late, where the pass got broken up, where he needs to anticipate the receiver coming out of his break. In the route, but that's something he'll learn in training camp. Getting meshed up with great NFL coaches, and getting that repertoire made with his receivers can go a long way for him.
Yeah, there's no question about it. There's just so much to like about the kid. That's what you were talking about is his dual threat ability, his ability to get out of the pocket, to make something out of nothing. That's what separates him from the other quarterbacks in this class. And, we're seeing a trend over the past couple of years of quarterbacks becoming a lot more mobile. And Malik Willis, he takes that to a whole nother level while also being able to keep the typical quarterback skill set that you would consider. He's probably got one of the strongest arms in this class, and one of the strongest arms you've seen in maybe the last 3 drafts. He is everything that you could want. You just need to make sure at the NFL level you can put it all together. And, that's what it's for. You never know in the draft what's going to happen. And, sometimes you just got to take a chance on them and see if it works out.
Yeah, for sure. The deep ball and arm strength that he has is insane. I mean, his combine, throwing reps were ridiculous, where he was just launching bombs in front of all those scouts. But now we're going to move on from Malik Willis. I mean, I can talk about him for the full hour. But we're going to have to move on and go to the next guy in Kenny Pickett out of Pittsburgh. This guy, 5 years at Pittsburgh, 12,000 passing yards, 81 touchdowns. Like, the stats are there. The experience is there. The hand size is questionable, but we won't get into that. Other people will knock on that weakness with him. But just a guy that seems like he's the most pro-ready in terms of overall experience going into this year's draft.
No, I don't think there's any question about that. And Kenny Pickett, over the past 5 years, has proved that size doesn't matter. And, he's going to continue to try to prove that as he goes into the NFL. We've seen at his pro day, at the combine, yes, it's, hands. We saw in the rain at the Senior Bowl that he was missing a few throws during practice day. I think it was on the Wednesday. And people started, saying, oh, is the hand size going to be an issue? Could it be? But he came out on the pro day with his NFL-sized football in his small little hands, and he put on a show. He was great, and, people just need to kind of put that on the side and understand that this guy has a ton of talent. He's got the off-field leadership skills that you want in a quarterback. And, man, the past 5 years in Pittsburgh, come on. The way he's improved from his freshman year until last year, you got to look at that before you can take everything away from him because of his hand size.
Yeah, something that I actually saw on Twitter earlier today that's actually pretty interesting to me, just as a Packers fan. Kenny Pickett is 5 months older than Jordan Love, who was drafted 2 years ago. I mean, what more do you need to know about his just age and experience? I mean, Joe Burrow also was an older prospect coming out of the draft, and obviously just led the Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl. So you can't really fault him with his age. And honestly, it just means he's going to be more experienced going in. He's a very toolsy pocket passer. Looking at his tape, he doesn't do much. Getting outside the pocket, extending plays quite like Malik Willis does. But what he has against Malik Willis is the accuracy and anticipation I was talking about. He's able to throw guys open. He has quick eyes, makes very quick reads in the pocket, and that's why I love him going to Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh's offense was perfect for that because that's what you saw from Big Ben. Big Ben had quick eyes and anticipated his receivers getting open, and you never relied on him, doing too much out of the pocket. Just let him stay in there, be methodical, and find his target downfield.
See, that's where I had Kenny going first. I thought going to Pittsburgh would be the perfect situation for him. But as you mentioned, he is the most pro-ready quarterback in this draft, if you look at it. And they just signed Mitch Trubisky to a 2-year deal. And, obviously, things can change. There's still 4 weeks until the draft. And, they could think that he could be the guy, and they go and get him with the 20th pick. But I think there has been a lot of concern over him over the past couple weeks, and I think that's really tanked his stock a lot. It's going to be interesting to see because originally I had him possibly going to the Carolina Panthers, but not anymore. I think if the Panthers are going quarterback, it's going to be Malik Willis, or it's not going to be a quarterback. I just don't think there's any other choice for them. But no, Kenny Pickett is a typical pocket passer with a little more mobility than you would typically see. He's got a good arm. He's got the accuracy. He can throw on all levels of the field. And he's just got the experience. And as an NFL coach with a team that just needs a quarterback, that is what you want in your locker room. It's going to be interesting to see who takes the risk with the hand size and tries to put him in there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's interesting you brought up the Carolina Panthers because I do think that's another potential landing spot. I think from what I know, I think there was a connection with Matt Rule. I don't know if he recruited him to Temple. I think that might be the connection there. But I saw a picture surfacing on Twitter of the two together. Matt Rule looked really slim compared to the picture that came out at the owners' meetings this past week with Matt Rule with the coaching picture. But if there's a connection there, I could see Matt Rule. If they can't find anybody, until April, which is looking like most teams are pretty much wrapped up with what they want to do until after the draft in terms of free agents. So I was saying in my mock draft I wanted the Panthers to try to make a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo before the draft, but I think right now they're going to test their luck with the draft, see if one of these guys can fall to them at 6, and Kenny Pickett might be an option there for the Carolina Panthers. Just what they need in the offense, a toolsy guy, a pro-ready, guy that has all the tools to make big plays, make big passes, and honestly a little bit more experience, I'd say, than Sam Darnold.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've lived through Sam Darnold. We don't need that anymore in the NFL. But it's crazy that you talk about this. With Jimmy G, it's a lot can still happen in this quarterback market. You got Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo still out there on the trade market. I mean, Baker needs to be moved because Deshaun Watson is the starting quarterback there. He's out. Baker's out. And then Jimmy G, Shanahan said that he could stay. But right now it's looking like Trey Lance is going to start, and I don't think you want Jimmy's contract in San Francisco going into next season. So we're already talking about, Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral, all these guys that could possibly go to the Lions, to the Panthers, to whoever. Those might not be options for quarterbacks by the time the draft rolls around in a couple weeks. So, it's just interesting to see what teams' philosophies are going to be regarding quarterbacks by draft time, and to see if any of these predictions change. There's still a lot to happen in this offseason.
Yeah, I think Baker's definitely going to be the wild card. I mean, the Browns signed Jacoby Brissett in free agency. It seemed like he was going to be the backup to Deshaun Watson. But now there's reports coming out that if Cleveland wants to move on from Baker Mayfield, they're going to have to eat some of his contract to do so. And honestly, at that point, why not just keep him? I mean, we still, the verdict's still out on a potential Deshaun Watson suspension. So why not just run it back with Baker for a couple games? But I mean, that all depends on Baker. What does he think of wanting to, just be the scapegoat, bridge quarterback for a Deshaun Watson suspension to, follow through. But Kenny Pickett, definitely an interesting prospect. Experience is a strong suit. I mean, a 5-year guy at Pitt, very aged, very mature coming into the league. Seems like, I would say, probably the most pro-ready guy in that regards. At Pitt, they made, a little bit of a noise, got into some big games this year, which is the big thing for me. I want to see him play in, some big game moments. And, winning the ACC championship this year at Pitt was a big jump for Kenny Pickett this past season. But let's move on to the next guy on the list. And I have Matt Corral as my quarterback 3 in this year's class. Seems like he had the same. But Matt Corral, 4 years at Ole Miss. Guy's explosive, very explosive runner. The big thing for me, he is fantastic. Watching his tape was absolutely fantastic at RPOs. And it's something that I love a lot about his game. Being able to utilize his strong arm, his eyes are great, makes right decisions pre-snap, and then immediately after on the run pass options. But that type of quarterback, he needs the right scheme. Yeah. Like the way he plays, he would be perfect in a Matt LaFleur type offense. The way they run the RPOs with the run game, and then but also you can utilize the big plays downfield in the passing game. But obviously, I don't want Matt Corral in Green Bay. But I'm just saying that'd be the perfect scheme for him in the National Football League. But athletic, strong arm, explosive guy, a lot to like about him.
I love Matt Corral. He might be my favorite quarterback in this draft class. He at one point in this season was my number 1 quarterback on the draft board. And, a lot has happened. Obviously, he had his ankle injury that took him out of the bowl game. And, he didn't do anything at the combine. And, he's a little undersized. There's some concerns about that as well. But there is no questioning the talent that this kid has. He's got one of the best arms. He's one of the quickest processors in this draft. When you're looking to go through his progressions and everything, he is a smart kid. He knows what to do. He understands the playbook. And yeah, he might need a perfect scheme for him. But I think if you give him time and you let him sit behind a quarterback for 1 or 2 years, I think he might be able to adjust and really figure out some of these other types of schemes in the NFL. Because he was kind of put into it. This is what he did at Ole Miss. We've never seen him outside of that scheme. And I think if you give him the chance with his football IQ, I think he might be able to do it if he's put into the right situation.
Yeah, for sure. And, I mean, you brought up the only weakness I have about the guy is that he's undersized. And what comes with that and, what comes with his explosive nature as a runner, he takes big hits a lot. You saw that injury late in the season where it looked scary. Everyone, immediately was freaking out when he had that injury late in the season of how that's going to affect his draft projection. People were thinking he's going to just completely fall out of it. But the medicals came back. He's fine. Should be ready to go by training camp, hopefully. But just that style, taking so many big hits is not what you want to expect. I mean, I don't want Matt Corral to come in his rookie year and be, given the reins and turn into Baker Mayfield from 2021. Where you just have like 17 injuries, you can't do anything passing the ball, and they just, just keep throwing you back out into the wolves. Every single game is the last thing I'd want for him. But very mature guy. I talked about with the scheme, just a spread-based offense, utilizing a lot of RPOs, just really fits the mold for what he can do as a quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean,
when I'm looking at it, as I said, there's a lot of different predictions out there. We've talked about this. If he drops out of the first round, because I don't think either of these teams are going quarterback now after what's happened in the offseason, I love him to the Commanders and to the Saints. I think those are two teams where he will fit in so well, and right now they have their bridge quarterbacks. They've got Carson Wentz. They've got Jameis Winston. I think, obviously, I would have loved for Matt Corral to learn under Sean Payton. I think him as a head coach for Matt Corral would have been perfect. But these are two teams where they're kind of, they're getting on the edge of playoff contention. But their quarterbacks are not playoff quarterbacks. You give it 2 years, build through the draft, build through free agency, have Matt Corral sitting on the bench for 1 or 2 years, learning the offense, learning the NFL, just learning what it is to be an NFL starting quarterback. Those are two teams that I would love for them to take a chance on him if he gets out of this first round. Because quarterback is not their main priority right now. Commanders aren't going to draft him early. The Saints, right now, I really don't think quarterback is their main priority since they just locked up Jameis Winston for another year. So, I don't know. It's interesting, but those are two teams that I love Corral going to.
Yeah, in my first mock draft, I had the Commanders taking Matt Corral, outside, right there at 11, right outside the top 10. And I thought it was a perfect fit. What they want to do offensively, I think the RPO game would work super well with our boy Gibby, Antonio Gibson out of the backfield, being able to hit Terry McLaurin downfield on the a spread RPO offense would just be would have worked perfect in Washington.
It would have been amazing.
But after getting Carson Wentz, they're not going to go that route. I think in the first round at this point anymore. Maybe if he slides to him in the second, the Saints are another option. I talked about it in my in the debrief and then on the show last week talking about the Saints with their first round pick. They're always a wild card. Yeah. We were bamboozled last year on our draft show when they took Peyton Turner in the first round just out of left field. It wouldn't surprise me. Even after giving Jameis Winston a decent amount of guarantees on that 2-year contract, to see them draft Matt Corral. I don't think that they're completely sold on Jameis Winston. I'm sold on him. He was 5-2 as a starter last year. I
Yeah.
think with Jameis Winston, without tearing his ACL, leads the Saints into the playoffs last year. I don't think they should give up on him. But new regime coming in, Sean Payton no longer there, new head coach. Maybe they want to go a different direction from what they saw last year, and Matt Corral could be the one that they take in the first round. So I think he's one I wouldn't be surprised if he stuck in the first, snuck into the first round and ends up making it three quarterbacks, landing, in the top 32.
I mean, hey, who knows? Maybe Jameis Winston won't even be able to see by the beginning of the season, and they're going to need a quarterback. You never know. But, no, I completely agree. The Saints, they always do something crazy. Nothing like the Raiders with their picks, but, they're unpredictable. You don't know what they could do. They've got a lot of holes. They've got a lot of cap issues. So it just depends. Are they thinking in the now, or are they thinking in the future? What do you want to see? And I'm excited to see what this new regime is thinking.
Yeah. My most exciting part about Matt Corral, and it's funny we bring up the Jameis Winston thing,
Yeah.
he threw 10 less interceptions last year than he did in 2020. I mean, he was able to turn it around. That was one of the big concerns going into the year was the interceptions he had in 2020. But through 10 fewer interceptions in 2021, I bring up Jameis Winston just because he's the king of interceptions and still playing pretty solid. But the fact that he was able to mature and grow throughout the years at Ole Miss. His accuracy, was something that suffered a little bit in my opinion. When he was forced,
bit, yeah.
like when he was forced outside the pocket, and then had to reset his base and then throw again. But I mean, that should be common, in my opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you are just a Trevor Lawrence coming out of the draft, where you're a polished, perfect prospect coming into the league, you're going to have that issue. But ultimately, it's just being undersized, taking too many big hits. I don't want to say an injury risk. I mean, because it's not like Tua's big injury coming into the league, and what we've seen from Tua. But I do think just the style of how he plays could potentially lead to that once we get to game time on the field for Matt Corral.
And you also have to consider that the Saints just lost Terron Armstead, one of the best tackles in the NFL. So do you really want to put a guy that, could be considered a light risk or an injury risk behind an offensive line that you're not too sure about anymore? It used to be a very good offensive line. Is it going to be that for the rest? You never know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited for him. I think he has the potential to be the best quarterback in this draft. He's just got everything that you could want in a quarterback. But, with everything that's happened over the past couple weeks, right now he is my quarterback 3.
Yeah. All right, so let's move it along to the next one. And this one we might be a little separated here, but I like both these guys a lot. But I think they're on that, 3-tier, A and B. And it's Desmond Ridder and Sam Howell. But we'll start with Desmond Ridder just because I like how the same thing with Kenny Pickett. I think Desmond Ridder coming into the draft is a very experienced quarterback. And for him, he's played in the big games. Played in the college football playoffs this past season. He had a lot of poise playing in those big games against some, top, caliber players that, the similar opponents he'll be facing in the National Football League. But at the same time, I think he has below average tool sets in terms of being a passer. He was great in big moments. He answered the bell, was a great teammate, a great leader on the field. But there's still some things that needs to be cleaned up. And I love this comp from Lance Zierlein from NFL. He comped him as Alex Smith. Great leader, experienced in big games, but not necessarily a quarterback that has all the tools to do it all on his own, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no. And I completely agree. Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder, I've been going back and forth on a lot. And, I'll start with Desmond Ridder because we're doing that. But, no, I completely agree. I think, he has the ability to be a great quarterback in the NFL. He's got the size. He has got the leadership. And he does have the skill set, but it's just not polished. And that's the thing. We've seen some accuracy issues. We've seen, sometimes he can be a little bit of a slow operator. He gets a lot of balls batted down at the line of scrimmage. I think he had, 26 balls batted down last season, something like that. It was a lot. And, it's just something that he's going to need to work on. And a lot of people see him as having a ton of potential, which he does. But there is a lot more to work on with Desmond Ridder than there is to work on with some of the other quarterbacks that we're considering as the top 5 potential first-round draft picks. So when you're a team and you're looking at possibly drafting Desmond Ridder, you're looking at a project. And you're not looking at a guy, that, sit behind him 1 year and he can definitely be your starter year 2 coming out. You've got to take your time. You got to make sure he's ready. And you really need to put some time and effort into building around this kid. So there's a lot to think about, but you also have to consider he has a very high ceiling. He can be a very good quarterback in the National Football League.
Yeah, I think the best situation for Desmond Ridder going into the NFL is landing with the Atlanta Falcons. Yep. I think going to the Falcons in the second round will be a good situation for him. Let Arthur Smith build around him in his first year while running, the show with Marcus Mariota. I think the Falcons probably have a bottom 2 roster right now in the National Football League. I think I think they might have the worst roster. Between them or the Bears. Their rosters right now of what they have is bad on both sides. And Atlanta, I don't see them being more than a 3 to 4 win team next year with Marcus Mariota. I mean, unless they get some receiver in, whether it be in the first round or a free agency, but even then, I don't see their ceiling being too high. So I think it would be smart to go the avenue in the second round with Desmond Ridder, build him behind the scenes like how quarterbacks used to be and how Trey Lance was this past season, the way I think that you should do it with quarterbacks, even though I was on the start Trey Lance train all year. But I think Desmond Ridder's the one, just with the skill-wise, the skills he has as a passer is nothing off the charts. So you have to groom him in a way similar to Malik Willis, but he's experienced and intelligent enough to win in big games. Atlanta's going to be playing some big games in the future if they want to start competing in the NFC South or in the NFC in general. But I think a second round slide with Desmond Ridder might get him there. But something I do have to say, watching Desmond Ridder's tape, and something that funny enough reminded me of 2021 Carson Wentz this past season. At times I thought he was too competitive and did too much, especially early in the games. I mean, we saw that from Carson Wentz all year last year with the Colts, where it's early, dude. There's no reason to be forcing balls downfield in the first quarter. What do you just take your L, come back in the next drive? I thought Desmond Ridder did a lot of that in Cincinnati. I love the competitive spirit, but at some point you gotta calm down a little bit. And the other thing, he had a slow release with the ball. So some of the downfield throws, it allowed safeties to close in and get pass breakups on them. But that's just some of the little things that can get cleaned up if he has time to sit and fully get groomed and polished out by a good coach.
Yeah, and I'll get into that stuff in a minute. But going back to the whole thing with the Atlanta Falcons, I completely agree with you. I think they would be a perfect situation for him. But you need to make sure that there's another quarterback on that roster, because Marcus Mariota has had a history of getting injured or playing really, really badly in the NFL. And Marcus Mariota has had help in the past. Now he has no help except for Kyle Pitts. So if you want Desmond Ridder to sit in the background, not do anything for at least a season, you need another guy in that locker room that will be able to be that QB2, because you don't want Marcus Mariota getting a concussion in week 2 and having Desmond Ridder have to go out there into the fire and trying to put it out. So that's the only thing that I would be concerned about with him going to Atlanta, especially since Atlanta has absolutely nothing on that roster. No defense, no offensive line, no weapons except Kyle Pitts. You just need to be confident that you've got another guy out there that you can throw on the field if Marcus Mariota were to get injured early on in the season. Going on to what you said about Ridder being too competitive, completely agree. There were a lot of times where I was watching and he was putting his body on the line, and it was about 3 minutes into the first quarter.
Yeah.
Running, diving for the first down. I'm like, bro, you're at the 20-yard line. You're going to punt. It's fine. It happens. You don't need to worry about it. You're most likely still going to win this. That 1 yard is not going to change the game right now. And there are multiple reasons why you can't do that. One, with the passing, what you mentioned, turnovers. It's going to happen if you keep doing that. Two, what I mentioned, getting hurt. You don't want to do that, especially early on in your career. You want to be on the field as much as possible once you become the starting quarterback, because this is the time for you to learn. Once it gets too late, it becomes too late, because you're going to get a lot of pressure from the media. You're going to get a lot of pressure from your teammates expecting you to be the guy. So you need to be on the field as much as possible. And, obviously the little things, as we mentioned, the slow processing, the release timing, stuff like that, the accuracy, the consistency, and, those are things that can be fixed. I wouldn't say easily, but I'll say pretty easily by NFL coaching staff if you work with the person and give them time.
Yeah. And just to end on a high note with Desmond Ridder, because we've been knocking him for a good bit there.
Yeah.
But one thing yeah, one thing he is, I would say, a lead at, and acts like an NFL type quarterback from what I saw. He is advanced at pre-snap reads. Being able to point out coverages, being able to point out rushes for his offensive line, and whether it's audibles, but the entire pre-snap aspect of the game is so important in today's NFL, and he masters it. And he really showed that in Cincinnati, and something I really liked about him. And also, similar to what I talked about with Malik Willis, he can drive a pass. I mean, once he gets set, once he gets in his base, he has a lot of power coming off his leg to drive a ball. He's got that weird, slow release thing going for him once he throws it. That gets him in trouble. But overall, highly intelligent, experience in big games, just clean up the little things. And I don't see him sliding into the first round, but I think like a team like the Falcons in the second round could be a good fit for him.
Yeah, and you also have to consider out of all the quarterbacks, he might be one of the most technically sound.
Yeah,
of all of
for
them.
Sure.
If you look at it, his mechanics are robotic. They are almost perfect. Now, obviously, he does have his issues, and he might need to fix some little things, but the basic quarterback mechanics are there. And some of these other guys don't have those perfected, but he does. Mm-hmm. So, yes, we have taken him down a lot right now, but it's nothing to do with what he can become. It's just what he is now is not a first-round level quarterback. He has the potential to become it. He's got what he needs. He's got the base for it. Now he just needs to build up from that and really show what he can do.
Mm-hmm. For sure. All right, let's now switch to our fifth and final quarterback we see maybe sneaking in to the first round, and it's UNC's Sam Howell. Played 3 years at UNC, got recruited heavily by Mack Brown. I think it was Florida State maybe he was going to try to go to, but Mack Brown forced him into UNC, speaks highly of him after his 3 years. Last year looked great. 2020, I mean by last year, not this past season, the one before.
Yep.
He had all of his weapons still there before they left in the draft. Had a little bit of a tough 2021, 2022 season this past year. But overall, a very confident team player type of guy. Strengths, his arm strength. I mean, that guy has a strong arm. I think he throws probably the best deep ball in the class. Malik Willis has a cannon, but I think placement-wise, I think he throws the best deep ball. The most catchable deep ball, just perfect, comes right out of his hand, nice arc, always right on point. And he's also tough. Tough guy, gritty kind of guy. Reminds me slightly a little bit of Baker Mayfield, not just the fact he kind of looks like him, but just the fact that he has a good arm strength and a tough guy. But overall, I don't know. I mean, this is going to be a guy where maybe, I think if Detroit goes a different direction at 2, maybe at 32, they go with Sam Howell. And I think that might be the only way he sneaks into the first round, unless a team, maybe like the Colts tries to trade back up into the first round. But I don't quite see it. The only thing I do say at 32 with the Colts, or excuse me, with the Lions at that pick is that he did play with the Lions staff at the Senior Bowl, along with Malik Willis. So they got two, a good look at both those two quarterbacks during the Senior Bowl week and during the game, where maybe they could, swing one way or the other with those two quarterbacks. And if Malik Willis is off the board, maybe Detroit turns their attention to Sam Howell at 32.
See, I love Sam Howell. I don't think this is the right word, but he's one of the most overhated quarterbacks in this class. And I feel like he's been getting, over the past season, his value has just gone down tremendously. Even though he didn't have a bad season at UNC this year. He threw 24 touchdowns and had 9 interceptions, threw 64%. He had 17 rushing touchdowns on top of that. He is a baller. That is the best way to describe Sam Howell. He is an absolute baller. Yes, he reminds me of Baker Mayfield with some of his decision-making skills as well, which, obviously has brought down his value, what we've seen over the past year and a half. But you can't deny that he has the skills, he's got the leadership, and he brings the energy like no one else. He's there, he's the guy. And as you mentioned, I like the move to Detroit a lot. I think if both Malik Willis and Sam Howell on the board, either of them could go at 32. It'll be interesting to see which one of them does go if they decide to go quarterback. Another team that I'm interested in, though, Carolina Panthers. If he gets into the second round, the Carolina boy staying in Carolina, going to Matt Rule, and taking the reins away from Sam Darnold, which should happen. I think it'd be really interesting to see in either of those situations. I really don't see Sam Howell as a first-round quarterback right now. He's got a lot of skill. It's just it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen right now. And I think 32 is his really only chance for him to go in the first round.
Yeah, and I really liked the fit you talked about with the Carolina Panthers, but the problem is after 6, they don't pick again until the 4th round.
Yeah.
So, and they don't have that many picks at all to even try to package up to get into the second or third for him as Sam Howell starts to fall. But I agree. I love the pick, or the fit with the Carolina boys staying in Carolina kind of feel. I don't see Carolina being the option just with the capital that they have. But the one thing I do want to say, and I got to knock on them. I got to get my knocks in on these quarterbacks. But with Sam Howell, I feel like he has some issues trusting the play, and not the scheme, but more of the plays and the routes where he kind of holds onto the ball longer than he should. He took a lot of unnecessary sacks where he just didn't trust his guys to be at the spots they needed to be at the right time, and also couldn't trust his eyes. There were times on the film where he was looking at the guy, but didn't trust it, and instead looked at somebody else and threw an incomplete pass or threw it away completely. And some of those things I just couldn't quite understand from him. Watching his film, like why these decisions were happening for him. And the other thing, there is a little bit of some placement accuracy issues. I do have to admit. But the arm strength downfield, just the best deep ball, I think, in the class this year.
I mean, he definitely needs to work on his touch and timing. That's something that I saw a lot in the tape.
Yeah. Especially
on intermediate passes. He does tend to sail his receivers a little bit. He sometimes throws a little behind. And that is very consistent for him that he does that. And I think that's something that he will have to improve upon. And it's another one of those little things where it should be able to be fixed. But you've got to admit, his confidence dropped a lot this season. I think losing so many talented players and, the media absolutely killing him all season long. Like, yes, he didn't play like he has the 2 seasons before, but, that took a toll on him. And I think that took his, it just took his mentality down. And that can be seen as both something where he can grow, and also it could be taken as a negative where, all this negative pressure on him caused him to perform poorly. And, that's going to be something that GMs and coaches are going to have to look at and see what is it that made him fall off. And the interviews are going to be extremely important for that because you need to see what kind of guy he is. And that's how you're going to decide, is he a guy that we can take a chance on and him really skyrocket into what he could become?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I don't understand like the 2022 year. I do think I agree with you. It was overhated. I mean, he still put up good stats. There were some games where, potentially it could have gone the other way, and probably should have for UNC this past season. And the win total, was not what they were expecting this year. But at the same time, he lost a lot. I mean, I don't want to say like the excuse was there, but he didn't have everything going for him in 2022, 2021, 2022, like he did the season beforehand. And I love the point you brought up about the interviews, really figuring out what happened this past season. I'm sure a lot of scouts have been talking with, people at UNC and Mac Brown especially, trying to figure that out. But it's exciting.
Yeah.
Exciting. I love talking about these quarterbacks and draft stuff because there's no definite number one. And there's no definite, projection pick range where we're gonna see these guys falling like we saw in years past. So definitely interesting. Excited to talk about it. Just what else do you have, for these projections? Real quick, I do want to bring up one of my guys. I got to bring up my Air Raid boys, Bailey Zappi, Western Kentucky, also going into this year's draft. Isn't the most impressive athlete out there, but had a lot of nice touch on the ball, made some intelligent plays when he needed to in my air raid offense. And also, real quick, also shout out to our Elon guy as well, Davis Cheek, had his pro day today. Wishing him the best throughout this process as well. But any last minute things you want to talk about with some of these projections, some of these quarterbacks, what we might see in 4 weeks? Kind of going to wrap up the quarterback talk, moving in toward draft time.
I mean, just the only thing I can say, expect the unexpected. Don't expect, we just said Malik Willis is both of our number one quarterbacks. By the time draft time comes along, he might not be there. And you've got to understand that this process, especially with this QB class, anything can happen. 2 quarterbacks on the market still in trades. Those guys can change this market up a bit. And one thing, watch out for my boy Brock Purdy. Everybody's hating on him. He's not a first-round quarterback. He's not a second-round quarterback. But watch out. He's got some skill in that 3rd or 4th round. I believe in him.
Yeah, another one we brought up that I think could turn into a decent backup in the NFL is Carson Strong as well out of Nevada.
Yes.
I do know from what I've read on Twitter and some of the leaks have been favoring Caleb Ebley to the Denver Broncos potentially. Just a guy that they like and might want to kind of work with. But I don't foresee him turning into anything more than just being a good presence in the locker room.
Yeah.
Backup kind of role. But yeah, interesting stuff with these quarterbacks. No real certainty on anything. I mean, it's insane. And I'm so interested to see how many of these top 5 quarterbacks actually fall into the first round in April's draft. And maybe we only see 2 guys. Maybe Willis and Pickett turn out to be the only first round guys on the board, and someone's going to get some good value on a Matt Corral, on a Desmond Ridder into the 2nd round, or maybe in great value on a Sam Howell into the 3rd round. Will definitely be interesting to see for sure. So next up, what we got on the schedule next week, Matt will be joining us back again, same time next Friday. Time zones are weird. But if you're on Pacific time, where I am at, it will be 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, just like it was today. East Coast, 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and then Guza's time in London. I mean, what is it over there right now?
It's almost 10 o'clock right now.
Yeah, almost
so
10 o'clock. So
if you're listening here,
if you're overseas, like Guza over here, it's going to be a little late night session talking about these prospects. But next week, we'll be doing wide receivers. So a lot to talk about. There's some exciting prospects and even ones that I'm really juiced up about. Being a Packers fan, potentially seeing them in the green and gold come April. Oh, exciting time, Guza. Draft time almost upon us. Favorite time of the year. Keep a lookout. Be careful out there today. April Fools. Don't get caught up on any April Fools nonsense out there. But happy start of April. It's officially draft month. So a lot to be excited about going forward. Guza, thanks for joining. I'll see you next week talking wide receivers.
See you next week.
All right, so there you have it. Quarterback, first round quarterbacks discussion, roundtable with Matt Laguza. Thanks, Matt, for joining. But yeah, next week, wide receivers. We'll keep things rolling along, pushing out content as we get closer to the NFL draft, really breaking down these prospects, getting closer to draft time. But thanks so much for watching. If you missed any part of it, you can go back and watch it on the YouTube channel. If you don't have time to watch it on YouTube, you're more of a commuter to work, it will be up on the podcast tomorrow evening at The Slaw Sports Show, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get a podcast, you can find it at The Slaw Sports Show. But thank you all for watching, and until next time.